A good day and welcome to our further lesson in the study of the book of Daniel, lesson 17. This is the end of chapter 9, so we're going to do the last part of the 9th chapter, starting at verse 20 to the end of the chapter. Now, last week we did the first part of chapter 9, and this was about Daniel's prayer for the restoration of Jerusalem, the restoration of his people, and a repentance for the sins of the Jewish people, of the Jewish nation, and of all the things which they had done against God over the past number of years. Daniel apparently took it upon himself to make this prayer, to make amends for what he considered to be the failures of the Jewish people towards God. And while he was doing this second thing happened. And it starts now in verse 20. Now while I was speaking, praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God for the holy mountain of my Lord. Yes, while I was speaking in prayer, the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, reached me about the time of the evening offering. So Daniel is saying, while he was still praying, the prayer, as mentioned in the first part of this chapter, while he was still praying, his prayer was answered, which indicates how fast our prayers can reach to heaven, and how fast at times our prayers can be answered. Sometimes it seems that our prayers are never heard or not heard very quickly, but it shows that they can be heard, they are heard, and they can be answered very swiftly. So Daniel was saying, while he was still praying, while he was still in a prayer, the angel Gabriel came to him once again, as he had done a number of times previously, came to him as an answer to the prayer, in an answer to the prayer. And he says while he was still speaking, the angel, being caused to fly swiftly, reached me about the time of the evening offering. Now this would be around 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And even though the Jewish temple had been destroyed and Jewish people were no longer doing the evening offerings, this was the time that it would have been done had this practice been still continuing. And some people have examined the prayer which Daniel prayed in the first part of this chapter and said it would take anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes to really pray. So this shows how fast Gabriel, the angel, has been dispatched and arrived at Daniel's side. So Daniel was still praying, and the angel Gabriel, being caused to fly swiftly, reached me about the time of the evening offering. And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I have now come forth to give you skill to understand what he had been really inquiring about. And this was the full interpretation of Jeremiah's prophecy about the 70 years. It appears that Daniel was not quite certain about all of the ramifications of this. And he knew what happened in the past, but he wasn't too sure what happened, how this would interpret and be manifest in the future. And it says, I have now come forth to give you skill to understand. At the beginning of your supplications, the command went out, and I have come to tell you, for you are greatly beloved. Therefore consider the matter and understand the vision. So Daniel is trying to understand these visions that he had, trying to understand Jeremiah's prophecy, as outlined last week. And now Gabriel has been dispatched in response to this request in response to Daniel's imprecations. He said, because Daniel, you are greatly beloved in heaven. Your prayers are reaching heaven. You are greatly loved, and therefore I have been sent to give you the answer to your requests and to make you understand vision. This is really what this little section is about. And now we go on to the vision itself. He says, 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city. Now it's important to understand the term weeks in this passage. In the time when this was written, weeks really meant 7. Not particularly 7 days, but 7. And it has been used to mean 7 days in certain places, but also 7 years in others. So the term weeks really can refer to either a week or a year or 7 years, a week of years, so to speak. So this was one thing. 70 weeks are determined for your people and for your holy city. So 70 weeks, which would be 70 times 7, if it's considered weeks of years, would be 490 years. And it says these are meant to be determined for Jerusalem and for your people, for these 6 features. 1, to finish the transgression. To finish the transgression against Israel and against God. To make an end of sin. To abolish sin altogether. To make an end of people sinning. To make reconciliation for iniquity. To bring in everlasting righteousness. To seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. So 70 weeks, 490 years, are determined for this to come about. Now, the other thing that has to be considered in this is the fact that a year, in the time this was written, was considered to be based on the lunar month, and therefore a year consisted of 12 30-day months. In other words, the year was 360 days long, not 365 days long as it is today. The calendar making the years 365 days was not comprised until, well, after the birth of Christ. So in these days, the year was 360 days in length, and an extra month would be added every one needed in order to make up the difference that was required. So it said in 70 weeks, there would be these 6 events: to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. So God sent Gabriel in order to give Daniel this interpretation, because Daniel was greatly beloved and because he was praying in repentance for his sin, for the sin of his people. It says in Matthew chapter 6, verse 8, "For your Father knows the things you have need of before you ask him." So God knew what Daniel was going to ask, and he had this all prepared because Daniel was beloved because he prayed. So Daniel had this interpretation of vision because he didn't really understand fully what was going on in Jeremiah and in the visions that he had seen. So God said at the end of 70 weeks, these 6 things would happen. Then he went on to say, "Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem." Now there have been a number of commands issued about the restoration of the temple in Jerusalem. One was made by Cyrus in 538 BC to restore the temple. There was also a decree put out by Darius in 577 BC, and one by Artaxerxes in 458 BC to rebuild the temple. But it says this will start from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem, not the temple. And the only command that was given to restore Jerusalem was made by on the first day of the month of Nisan in 445 BC, and reported in Nehemiah 2, chapter 2, verses 1 to 8. The decree was sent out that the people could rebuild the city and the temple. And it says, from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublesome times. Now there were 2 divisions here of the prophecy, 7 weeks and 62 weeks. And it is said in both Ezra chapters 9 and 10 and Nehemiah chapters 4, 6, 9, and 12 that the city was rebuilt, and there were troubles. There were troublesome times. There were problems. And it took the first 7 weeks, 49 years, to rebuild a city. And it says, so the first 7 weeks said that the street shall be built again and the wall even in troublesome times. And after that, after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. He shall be cut off for his people, not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end of it shall be with a flood. Now there has been some people who have done some calculations. And a man by the name of Sir Robert Anderson took the time of the command to restore and build Jerusalem and determined that would equilibrate, if you took the 69 weeks, it would equilibrate to 173,880 days. And if you calculate that out, from March 14th, 445 BC, it comes out to April the 6th, 32 AD, which apparently is the time when Christ entered Jerusalem and first proclaimed himself to be prince, or allowed himself to be proclaimed as the Messiah, as the prince. This has been worked out and collaborated by other mathematicians to be the exact date when Christ entered Jerusalem. So it says, the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. After the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off, because he was crucified, but not for himself. He was crucified for us, not for himself. And the people of the prince who is to come, the one who is to come later. And the one who came later was, of course, the Romans, who came and literally destroyed the city and the temple in around 72 AD. And it was a flood of soldiers. It was a flood of army. It was a huge number of soldiers who came. So it came like a flood. The end of it shall be with a flood. Until the end of the war, desolations are determined. So the city was destroyed, and it was desolate again after the Jewish rebellion, and the Romans put the Jewish rebellion down. So there are 69 weeks. But as you see, none of the things that would end in the 70 weeks have yet to be accomplished. So this is where it says, it comes into the last part of this, and he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. If you go to Revelations, this is very similar to the tribulation period. And this is considered to be the fact that between the 69th week, which ends with Christ's crucifixion essentially, and the 70 week, there is a long delay, a long period of time before the 70th week. And the 70th week, which is reported here as determined, in the 70th week, we have really the tribulation period, where the Antichrist comes, where there is an apparent a peace arrangement made with Israel, which is then broken, and of course, then the tribulation period ends with Christ's return. And it says here, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined. And this was similar to the type of problem that was seen in the previous chapter, when you had the goats and the male goat who come up after Alexander the Great, and was determined by the king of the Chaldeans, who took over part of Alexander's kingdom. And if you could go back to that section, you can see how this also correlates to what will happen in the days of the tribulation. So this is Daniel's 70-week prophecy. 60 to 62 weeks, 7 weeks, and 1 week, making it 70. 62 weeks between the time of the restoration of Jerusalem and the coming of the Messiah. 7 weeks between the time of the decree to rebuild Jerusalem and the rebuilding of the same, with considerable tribulation during that period of time, and then 1 week at the end, which has not yet happened, in order to bring about the end of transgression, the end of sin, the reconciliation for iniquity, the everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. This is the vision, the interpretation that Gabriel gave to Daniel about his vision. And this interpretation, which still holds today, the 69 weeks, which have been fulfilled almost to the day, and now the 70th week, which is still pending. So this was what Gabriel told Daniel, and this is the way it seems to be at the present time. Next week we're going to get into chapter 10 and start into it and see where we go, how far we go into it. But this is a complicated part of the book of Daniel, and we'll take our time in chapters 10 and 11. But that's sufficient for today. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next week. Bye for now.